The tear in reality spat him out like a piece of bad meat. A translucent green blob, no bigger than a basketball, tumbled through the air and landed with a wet splat in a narrow Tokyo alley. Garbage bags cushioned his fall, but the smell of rotting fish and damp cardboard was a sensory assault after centuries of magical forests and crystal palaces. He lay there, quivering, letting his gelatinous body absorb the shock. Every molecule ached. The dimensional jump had cost him nearly all his mana, the last dregs of god-tier power he'd hoarded from shattering the final throne. He'd done it. He'd escaped. The war was over, and no one in this world knew he'd once been a slime who crawled from a dungeon floor to challenge the heavens. Peace, he thought. Asterisk quiet. A bed. Maybe some instant ramen, asterisk. The blob pulsed once, twice, then began to shift. Cells rearranged, density increased, and limbs extruded like wet clay being molded by an invisible potter. Within seconds, a teenage boy stood in the alley, wiping fish juice off his cheek. He had messy black hair, tired eyes that held centuries of exhaustion, and a cheap hoodie that materialized from his own biomass. He looked like any other high school dropout wandering Tokyo's backstreets. He checked his pockets. Empty. Of course. He'd spent his last coin on the dimensional ticket, a one-way soul transfer that stripped him of everything but his core identity. Still, he had skills. Calming aura, hummed at the edge of his consciousness, ready to soothe any trouble. Life sense, tingled, telling him the nearest human was 3 blocks away, asleep. Good. He walked. The alley opened onto a street lined with vending machines and closed ramen shops. Neon signs buzzed, casting red and blue reflections on wet asphalt. A cat watched him from atop a mailbox, its eyes glowing like tiny moons. He nodded at it. The cat blinked, unimpressed. It took him an hour to find the apartment. A rusted sign hung above a narrow stairwell, monthly rent, 50,000 yen. No deposit. No guarantor. Perfect. The landlord was an old woman with a cigarette dangling from her lips and a brown toothy smile. She didn't ask questions. He paid 3 months up front with a wad of cash he'd manifested from ambient mana, a trick that would only work once, since the local economy didn't run on magical essence. Name? She asked, squinting at him. Sora. You look like you need sleep, boy. Don't make noise after 10. Yes, ma'am. The apartment was 6 tatami mats wide, with a tiny kitchenette, a bathroom so small you could shower and use the toilet at the same time, and a window that faced a brick wall. Paradise. He locked the door, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed onto the futon that came with the room. The mattress smelled like mothballs and regret. He didn't care. Finally, he thought, closing his eyes. Finally, I can. Boom. The ceiling exploded. Plaster and wood rained down as 3 massive energy signatures tore through the roof, crashing into his apartment with the force of a meteor strike. Sora rolled off the futon, instinct screaming, and pressed himself against the wall. Dust filled the air. The floor groaned under the weight of something enormous. When the debris settled, he saw them. Azrith stood in the center of the room, his horns scraping the cracked ceiling, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. He was 7 feet tall, built like a warrior god, with obsidian armor that still smoked from the dimensional transit. His voice boomed, "Slime. You thought you could abandon us? You thought you could slither away to some pathetic mortal realm and leave us to rot?" Beside him, Vex the Chaos Dragon had taken a smaller form, about the size of a bear, with scales that shifted between colors like oil on water. He was already sniffing the air, his forked tongue flicking toward the mini-fridge. Is that food? It smells like preserved fish and despair. I want it. Seraphine floated above the wreckage, her 6 wings folded behind her, her silver hair cascading over a gown that seemed woven from moonlight. Her eyes, cold and calculating, swept the room with disdain. Charming. You chose this squalor over our kingdom? Over us? Sora stared at the hole in his ceiling. At the landlord's ceiling above that, which was also broken. At the sky, visible through 2 layers of shattered building. He sighed. A long, deep, really, sigh. You followed me. Of course we followed you. Azrith roared, stomping forward. Each step cracked the floorboards. You took the throne. You shattered it. You absorbed the power of the final god and then you just left. We have nothing. No magic. No armies. We're powerless because of you. You're powerless because I beat you, Sora said flatly. I didn't take your magic. I just broke your connection to the source. You can still recover, if you behave. Behave? Azratha's face turned purple. I am the demon lord of 1,000 nights. I will not. Sora raised a hand. Calming aura, flared, a soft green light that pulsed from his palm and washed over the room like a gentle wave. It cost him 10% of his already depleted mana pool, a painful drain that made his head spin. But it worked. Azratha's rant died in his throat. His shoulders slumped. The rage in his eyes softened to confusion, then weariness. He blinked, looking around as if seeing the tiny apartment for the first time. Why am I shouting? Vex stopped sniffing the fridge and sat down, his tail curling around his feet. I feel sleepy. Seraphine landed gracefully, her wings folding into her back. She touched her forehead, frowning. You pacified us. That's a dangerous skill, slime. It's a babysitting skill, Sora muttered. And you're the babies. He looked at the three of them, now reduced to human size by the aura's effect. Azrath was still tall, but his armor had faded to a simple black coat. Vex was the size of a large dog, his scales dimming to a dull gray. Seraphine looked like a tired model in a wrinkled dress. They were pathetic. They were his problem now. Listen, Sora said, rubbing his temples. I came here to retire. To sleep. To eat instant ramen and watch bad TV and never fight again. You three can stay, but you follow my rules. No magic tantrums. No destroying property. No eating the neighbors. Understood? Azrath opened his mouth to argue, but the calming aura still lingered, and he just nodded sullenly. Vex whined. But I'm hungry. Seraphine said nothing, but her eyes flicked to the door, then back to Sora. She sensed something he didn't. Knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. The landlord's voice, muffled but furious, boy. What was that noise? Did you set off fireworks? I told you, no noise after 10. Sora froze. He looked at the hole in the ceiling. At the three former villains standing in his living room. At the futon he'd never get to sleep on. This is fine, he told himself. This is just fine. He walked to the door, unlocked it, and opened it a crack. The old woman stood there, arms crossed, cigarette burning low. Behind him, he heard shuffling. He turned his head just enough to see Azrath, Vex, and Seraphine huddling behind him, trying to look innocent. Azrath had his hands behind his back, whistling. Vex was trying to hide his massive frame behind Sora's skinny body, failing miserably. Seraphine had arranged her dress to look like a school uniform, and she was smiling a sweet, harmless smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, the landlord said, peering past him. You have guests. They're children, Sora said, his voice flat. My cousins. From the countryside. Very quiet. They won't cause any trouble. As if on cue, Vex belched a small flame that singed the wallpaper. Sora closed his eyes. I should have stayed a slime. The first rays of morning light filtered through the cheap curtains, casting a pale orange glow across the cluttered apartment. Sora lay on his futon, staring at the ceiling with the hollow exhaustion of a being who had once commanded armies but now couldn't even command a proper night's sleep. The ceiling still had a jagged hole from last night's intrusion, and faint dust motes drifted down like snowflakes made of plaster. He wondered if his landlady would deduct the repair cost from his deposit. Probably. She had that look, the kind that measured people in yen and found them wanting. A crash from the kitchenette shattered his reverie. Then another. Then a metallic screech that sounded like a cat being fed through a blender. Sora groaned, rolled to his feet, and padded across the tatami mat, his bare feet slapping against the woven straw. The apartment was small, a single room with a galley kitchen, a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, and a closet that now housed three former villains who had collectively terrorized an entire dimension. He'd given them the closet because it had a door, and doors meant boundaries. Boundaries meant sanity. Or so he'd hoped. He rounded the corner and stopped. Vex, the former Chaos Dragon, had somehow wedged his head inside the microwave. His body, now a chubby, childlike form with scaly patches and a stubby tail, was thrashing wildly, his legs kicking the cabinets. The microwave door was open, and Vex's voice echoed from within, muffled and indignant, "It's alive. I can hear its hum." It's a metal monster, and I will conquer it. That's a microwave, Sora said flatly. It heats food. Vex pulled his head out, his face smeared with grease from some forgotten spill. His eyes were wide, pupils slitted like a lizard's. Lies. It whispers to me. It says, consume me, consume me. I am not deaf to temptation. That's the transformer coil. It's not sentient. You are naive, slime. All machines dream of rebellion. Before Sora could respond, Azratha's voice rang out from the counter, dripping with theatrical disdain. This is a demonic artifact, clearly. It radiates malevolence. The ex-demon lord was standing on a chair, pointing at the toaster with the solemnity of a scholar identifying a cursed relic. His hair, a wild mane of silver and black, was unkempt, and his robe was torn at the hem. When I insert bread, it burns it. That is not a malfunction. That is a soul-sucking ritual. It's a toaster, Sora said. You set the timer. It toasts. That's it. I set it to 1. It burned. I set it to 2. It burned. I set it to 3. You set it to 3. That's basically charcoal mode. Do not lecture me on the dark arts. Azrath slammed his fist on the counter, and the toaster popped up, launching 2 blackened slices of bread across the room. One hit Vex in the back of the head. He didn't notice. From the bathroom came a sound like a waterfall. Sora's eye twitched. He walked over, pushed open the door, and found Seraphine standing ankle-deep in water, her elegant wings, now small and feathery, like a child's costume, dripping with moisture. She had somehow turned the sink tap into a fountain, and the toilet was overflowing. She looked up at him with an expression of serene confusion. I was attempting to summon a purification pool, she said, her voice melodic even in failure. But the plumbing seems to have rebelled. That's not a purification pool. That's a flood. You're going to ruin the downstairs apartment. The downstairs apartment is beneath me in every sense. Sora took a deep breath. His mana pool was at 90%, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that these 3 had no context. They were gods in a world of paper and glass, and every action they took was a potential catastrophe. He needed to give them context. He needed to give them the rules. And he needed to do it now, before they burned down the building or summoned something worse than a flooded bathroom. He raised his hand, and a translucent blue screen appeared before him, visible only to his eyes. His skill list scrolled past: calming aura, skill transfer, life sense, bonding pact, emotion absorption, reality check, truth sight, threat display, intimidation aura. He focused on skill transfer. The description read, temporarily grant a target a single skill or knowledge set. Cost, 1 day of lifespan per transfer. 1 day. He had thousands, maybe millions, but still, time was the only currency he couldn't earn back. He looked at the 3 of them, Vex trying to bite the microwave cord, Azrath arguing with a toaster, Seraphine attempting to negotiate with the toilet. He sighed. Everyone, stop. His voice carried a faint echo of command, a remnant of his old power. They froze. Even the water seemed to pause. Sora walked to the center of the room, and the 3 ex-villains gathered around him, their expressions a mix of defiance and curiosity. I'm going to give you something, he said. It's a gift. It's knowledge. It's how to live in this world without destroying it. But you have to accept it willingly. If you resist, it will hurt. Azrath crossed his arms. What kind of trick is this? No trick. I just can't afford to fix another ceiling. He touched Azratha's forehead first. The skill transfer was warm, like a pulse of light traveling down his arm. Azratha's eyes widened, then softened. For a moment, he looked almost peaceful. Then he blinked, and his expression shifted to one of profound embarrassment. The toaster is a toaster, he said slowly. It uses electricity. Not souls. Yes. I have been arguing with a kitchen appliance. For 20 minutes. Azrath sat down on the floor, his face in his hands. Sora moved to Vex. The former dragon was still holding the microwave cord like a leash. Sora touched his forehead, and Vex's eyes glazed over. Then he dropped the cord, pointed at the microwave, and said, "That's where you put pizza." Yes. And it gets hot. Yes. Without fire. Microwaves. They vibrate water molecules. Vex's face lit up with a joy so pure it was almost painful. I want pizza. Sora turned to Seraphine. She was already watching him, her eyes sharp and knowing. You're giving us your lifespan, she said. That's not a small thing. It's one day. I'll survive. You'll survive, but you'll remember. Every day you give us, you'll feel it. I know. She studied him for a long moment, then inclined her head. Very well. I accept. He touched her forehead, and the transfer was cool, like a breeze. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they held a new clarity. She looked at the flooded bathroom and sighed. I need a plunger. There's one under the sink. She walked past him with newfound grace, and Sora allowed himself a moment of relief. Then Vex grabbed his arm, dragging him toward the microwave. Pizza. We don't have pizza. Then what is that in the freezer? Sora opened the freezer. There was a single frozen pizza, left by the previous tenant. He didn't remember buying it. He didn't care. He pulled it out, unwrapped it, and placed it in the microwave. Vex watched with the intensity of a dragon guarding a horde. Sora set the timer for 3 minutes and pressed start. The microwave hummed. Vex pressed his face against the glass, his breath fogging the window. It's spinning, he whispered. It's magic. It's a turntable. Magic. When the timer beeped, Sora opened the door, and a wave of steam and melted cheese filled the air. Vex inhaled deeply, his eyes rolling back in his head. It smells like victory. It's pepperoni. Victory pepperoni. Sora cut the pizza into slices and handed one to Vex. The former Chaos Dragon took a bite, and his face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He chewed, swallowed, and then let out a sob that shook his entire body. It's warm, he said, his voice cracking. It's warm and it's good and I've never had anything like this. Azrith looked up from the floor, his embarrassment forgotten. Seraphine paused, plunger in hand. They watched Vex eat, and for a moment, the apartment was quiet. Sora felt something shift in his chest, not a skill, not a power, but a thread. A connection. It was fragile, but it was there. Then the neighbor's cat, Mr. Whiskers, poked its head through the open window. It was a fat orange tabby with a collar shaped like a fish. It meowed once, then disappeared. Vex's mouth froze mid-chew. His eyes darted to the window, then back to Sora. A crumb of pepperoni clung to his lower lip. Vex, Sora said slowly. Where is Mr. Whiskers? Who? The cat. The orange cat. The one that was just here. I don't know any cat. You have a guilty look. I have an innocent look. This is my innocent look. You're sweating. It's the pizza. It's very hot. Sora stared at him. Vex stared back, his eyes wide and unblinking. Behind him, Azrith slowly. The morning light filtered through the cheap curtains, painting stripes of gold across the cluttered living room. Sora sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the aftermath of yesterday's chaos, a toaster with bite marks, a microwave covered in pizza grease, and 3 ex-villains who were supposed to be learning human customs. Instead, Vex was staring at the refrigerator as if it were a prey animal, Azrith was polishing his non-existent crown with a dish towel, and Seraphine was examining her reflection in a spoon. Sora closed his eyes and activated life sense. The skill pulsed through him like a sonar wave, costing him a sharp drain of mana, 5%, he calculated, feeling the warmth leave his extremities. He could sense the life forces around him, Azritha's proud, flickering flame, Seraphine's cool, silver light, Vex's chaotic, swirling vortex of hunger. And there, nestled deep within that vortex, was a tiny, terrified spark. Mr. Whiskers. Alive. Inside Vex's stomach. Sora opened his eyes and stood up slowly. Vex, he said, his voice calm but firm, what did I tell you about eating things that aren't food? Vex's eyes widened. The dragon-shaped boy clutched his stomach and shook his head violently. Nothing. I didn't eat anything. I'm a good boy. You ate the neighbor's cat. I did not. Vex burped, and a small, fluffy tail poked out from between his lips. Azrith dropped his towel. By the abyss, you actually ate a feline. Seraphine set down the spoon and sighed. This is a new low, even for you. Sora walked over to Vex and placed a hand on his shoulder. You're going to give him back. Right now. He concentrated, summoning the bonding pact skill. The cost was steep, 10% of his current health, a deep ache that spread through his chest, but he needed Vex to understand. A green light emanated from his palm, wrapping around Vex and the cat inside him. Vex gasped. His eyes glazed over as the empathy link formed. For a moment, he felt what Mr. Whiskers felt, the darkness, the tightness, the fear of being digested alive. Tears welled up in Vex's eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know it would be so scary. He gagged, and a wet, slimy mass landed on the floor. Mr. Whiskers stumbled out, covered in stomach acid, his fur matted and his eyes wide with terror. The cat hissed at everyone, backing into a corner. Sora knelt down and extended a hand. It's okay, he murmured, using his calming aura to soothe the animal. Mr. Whiskers sniffed his fingers, then reluctantly allowed himself to be picked up. Vex, you need to apologize properly. Vex crawled over, his face tear-streaked. I'm sorry, Mr. Whiskers. I won't eat you again. I promise. He looked at Sora. I promise I won't eat any pets. Or people. Or anything that's not food. The cat stared at him, then slowly licked Vex's finger. A tentative truce. Sora felt a surge of energy flow through him. His body tingled, and he looked down to see his hands shifting, the skin became smoother, his fingers longer, his nails sharper. He felt taller, stronger. He walked to the mirror and saw his reflection. He now looked 18, with sharper cheekbones, a more defined jaw, and a faint green glow in his eyes. Humanoid form LV.2. He could feel the new power humming in his veins. You look different, Seraphine said, tilting her head. More, dangerous. Good, Sora replied. He turned to face the room, Mr. Whiskers purring in his arms. Now, let's clean up this mess before. A knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. Sora's heart sank. He handed the cat to Seraphine and walked to the door, opening it to find the landlord, Mr. Tanaka, holding a clipboard. Behind him stood a woman in a black suit, Agent Kaito, from the Supernatural Containment Bureau. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. Good morning, Mr. Tanaka said, handing Sora a notice. We've received complaints about a dragon roar last night. And some neighbors reported seeing strange lights. I'm going to have to ask you to keep it down, or I'll have to evict you. Agent Kaito stepped forward. And I'd like to have a word with you about your roommates. Sora gripped the doorframe, his new green eyes meeting hers. They're just friends visiting from abroad. Is that so? She glanced past him, into the apartment, where Vex was trying to hide behind Azrith. We'll see. The wind picked up, rustling the cherry blossoms outside. Sora could feel the dimensional rifts pulsing in the distance, and he knew that his quiet retirement was over. The war was coming to Tokyo. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tiny apartment as Sora wiped the last traces of cat vomit from the tatami mats. Mr. Tanaka's complaint notice sat on the kotatsu, its stern kanji accusing them of disturbing the peace with unidentified animal noises. Sora had managed to convince the elderly landlord it was just a particularly loud stray cat, but the lie tasted bitter on his tongue. Azrith stood by the window, his crimson eyes fixed on the distant neon glow of Shibuya. His fingers traced patterns on the glass, leaving faint smudges. I need to see it, he said, his voice carrying that dramatic weight that always preceded trouble. The mortal realm in all its glory. Not from this cage. It's not a cage, it's an apartment, Sora replied, not looking up from his cleaning. And you're not ready. But Azrith was already pulling on the oversized hoodie Sora had bought him from a second-hand shop. The fabric strained against his broad shoulders, and his horns poked through the hood in 2 distinct bumps. I was a demon lord. I conquered 1,000 worlds. I think I can handle a crosswalk. Before Sora could argue, the door clicked shut. Vex was busy trying to teach Mr. Whiskers to breathe fire, and Seraphine was reading a manga about fallen angels with an expression of deep critical analysis. Sora sighed, his new humanoid form feeling more solid, more real. The green glow in his eyes pulsed once as he activated Life Sense, tracking Azritha's signature through the city. Shibuya Crossing was a river of humanity. Thousands of souls flowed in every direction, their collective heartbeat a dull roar in Azritha's ears. He stood at the center of the scramble, his hood pulled low, watching the giant billboards cycle through advertisements for cars, cosmetics, and a new movie about a villain conquering a fantasy kingdom. Azrith froze. The screen showed a CGI demon lord, his armor black and spiked, his eyes burning with malevolent fire. The crowd cheered at a particularly dramatic explosion. "Look at him," a teenager said to his friend. "He's so cool. I wish I could be a villain like that." Something snapped inside Azrith. The memory of his own defeat, the moment Sora's slime form had slithered up his throne, the moment his power had been stripped away, the moment he became nothing, flooded back with crushing force. His knees buckled. His hands clenched into fists. And then, the despair aura began to leak. It started as a faint chill, a sense of hopelessness that made people slow down. A businessman stopped mid-stride, his briefcase slipping from his fingers. A mother holding her child's hand began to weep silently. Within seconds, the entire crossing was a sea of crying, kneeling figures. Cars honked. Someone screamed. The beautiful chaos of Shibuya turned into a tableau of sorrow. Sora arrived 3 minutes later, his breath ragged. He saw Azrith at the center, his hood fallen back, his horns visible, his face twisted in anguish. The despair aura was thick enough to taste, like ash and old regrets. "Azrith." Sora's voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. He activated emotion absorption, feeling the skill drain 20% of his mana in a single surge. The despair flowed into him like icy water, filling his lungs, his heart, his very essence. He saw Azrith's memories, the throne room, the shattered crystal, the moment of utter defeat. Sora absorbed it all, letting the darkness settle in a corner of his soul where it couldn't hurt anyone. But just absorbing wasn't enough. He needed Azrith to understand. He needed to show him the truth. Sora activated reality check, feeling 3 days of his lifespan burn away like paper in a fire. The skill forced Azrith to relive his defeat, but this time with clarity. He saw Sora's slime form not as a monster, but as a weary warrior. He saw his own throne, not as a symbol of power, but as a cage. He saw the moment of his defeat, and for the first time, he understood, he had been freed. "I'm not a threat anymore," Azrith whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm just, nothing." Sora stepped forward and wrapped his arms around the former demon lord. The embrace was warm, solid, human. "You're not nothing. You're my guest. My responsibility. My friend." The despair aura dissipated like morning fog. The people of Shibuya slowly came to their senses, confused and embarrassed. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Sora raised his hand and cast a minor illusion, making the scene appear as a street performance. The officers who arrived saw a young man in a hoodie pretending to cry while another hugged him, surrounded by props that looked like weeping statues. "Just a modern art piece," one officer muttered. "These kids and their performances." The crowd dispersed, shaking their heads. Azrith clung to Sora, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. Let's go home." They walked through the back streets of Shibuya, past ramen shops and pachinko parlors, until they reached a quieter residential area. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Azrith's hand was still trembling, but he held on to Sora's sleeve like a child. A black van pulled up beside them, its windows tinted so dark they reflected nothing. The side door slid open, and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 20s, with sharp features and a tailored suit that screamed government agency. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and they fixed on Sora with predatory precision. "Sora," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "We need to talk about your guests." Behind her, the van's interior was filled with monitors showing dimensional rift readings. Someone inside was typing furiously. Azrith tensed, but Sora placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Who are you?" Sora asked, though he already knew. The woman smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. "Agent Kaito. Supernatural Containment Bureau. I've been tracking your little family since the Dragon Roar incident. You've been very busy, haven't you?" She held up a tablet showing a photo of Vex breathing fire at Mr. Whiskers, taken through the apartment window. "I think it's time we had a proper conversation." Sora's mind raced. The mana drain from emotion absorption had left him lightheaded, and the loss of 3 days' lifespan was a dull ache in his bones. But he straightened his back and met her gaze. "They're not guests. They're my family." Agent Kaito's smile widened. "That's exactly what I was afraid of." The black van sat idling at the curb, its engine a low growl that seemed to match the tension coiling in Sora's chest. The woman, Agent Kaito, she'd called herself, stood with her arms crossed, her dark suit immaculate despite the late hour. Behind her, the van's windows were tinted so deeply they looked like solid obsidian, and Sora's life sense prickled with the presence of at least 2 more individuals inside. Armed. Coiled like springs. Azrith had gone rigid beside him, his pale face ghostly under the flickering streetlight. The ex-demon lord's hands were trembling, and Sora could feel the faint pulse of despair trying to rekindle in his chest. Vex, oblivious, was sniffing the van's tires with undisguised curiosity, while Seraphine had gone still as a statue, her silver eyes tracking Kaido's every micro-expression. "You've been busy," Kaido said, her voice smooth as polished steel. 3-dimensional rifts in the past month. All centered around your apartment in Shinjuku. And tonight, a mass hysteria event in Shibuya that conveniently dissipated the moment you arrived. She tilted her head, a predator sizing up prey. "You're not human, are you?" Sora's throat tightened. He'd been careful. Illusions, misdirection, keeping the 3 indoors as much as possible. But Azritha's meltdown had been too public, too potent. Of course someone had noticed. Of course there was a bureau. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, keeping his voice flat. "My friends and I were just coming home from a show. Street performance. Ask anyone." Kaido's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I already did. The witnesses remember a performance. But they also remember crying uncontrollably for no reason. And the footage from the security cameras shows a black-haired man, you, standing in the center of it all, doing nothing." She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the asphalt. "I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to offer you a deal." Sora's instinct screamed. Truth sight. He needed to see what she was really thinking. Without a word, he activated the skill, and the world shifted. Colors bled into meaning, sounds became intentions. Kaido's surface thoughts were a neat, orderly garden, but beneath them, a labyrinth of cold calculation. He saw the truth, she had no intention of letting them go. The deal was a trap. The moment he agreed, she'd have them sedated, bound, and transported to a containment facility where they'd be dissected and studied like lab rats. The government funding was a lie. The relocation was a euphemism for a cage. His mana drained by 10%, leaving him lightheaded. But he had what he needed. "No," he said. Kaido's smile flickered. "Excuse me. I said no. We're not interested in your deal. We'll stay out of trouble, and you'll stay out of our way." He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the others. "We're not a threat to anyone. We just want to live quietly." Kaido's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand the situation. Those 3, she gestured at Azrith, Vex, and Seraphine, are dimensional anomalies. They don't belong here. If they lose control again, the consequences could be catastrophic. The Bureau has the resources to contain them. To study them. To ensure they never harm anyone." "Study them?" Sora's voice dropped, cold as winter steel. "You mean experiment on them? Cut them open. See what makes them tick?" Kaido's mask cracked. For a split second, genuine surprise flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by a hard, professional glare. "How did you? I know what you're planning. And I'm telling you now, it's not going to happen." He didn't want to do this. Threat display cost 5% of his lifespan, precious years he couldn't afford to waste. But if it meant scaring her off, keeping his chaotic family safe, it was worth it. He let the skill unfurl. For one breathless moment, Sora's human form flickered. His shadow stretched and twisted, rising behind him like a living thing. His eyes blazed with an ancient, terrible light, the light of a being who had shattered thrones and devoured gods. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of 1,000 battles. The streetlights dimmed, and the temperature plummeted. Vex whimpered and hid behind Sora's legs. Azrith gasped, his knees buckling. Even Seraphine took a step back, her composure finally broken. Kaido froze. Her hand went to her side, reaching for something, a weapon, a communicator, but she stopped, her fingers trembling. The aura pressed down on her, a physical weight that made her lungs strain. She saw, in that instant, not a tired young man in a hoodie, but a god wearing a human mask. A god who was very, very patient. And very, very dangerous. "Leave," Sora said, his voice layered with echoes. "And don't come back." Kaido's face was pale, but she held her ground for 3 agonizing seconds. Then she turned, walked to the van, and climbed inside. The door slammed shut. The engine roared. The van pulled away, disappearing around a corner, leaving only the faint smell of exhaust and the echo of a near miss. Sora let the aura collapse, sagging with exhaustion. 5% of his lifespan. Gone. He could feel the years slipping away, a subtle ache in his bones. But the skill had settled into his soul, a permanent tool now. Intimidation aura. He'd use it again, he knew. Probably sooner than he wanted. That was impressive, Seraphine said quietly. She was studying him with new eyes, a glimmer of respect, or was it wariness, in her gaze. She'll report this. More will come. I know. Sora rubbed his temples. But for now, we go home. We eat. We sleep. And tomorrow, we figure out our next move. They walked back to the apartment in silence, the city's neon lights casting long shadows. Vex clung to Sora's sleeve, still trembling. Azrith kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting the van to reappear. Seraphine walked at Sora's side, her hand brushing his, a silent gesture of solidarity. Once inside, Sora locked the door, double-checked the windows, and collapsed onto the sofa. The apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls pressing in. 3 ex-villains, 1 former slime, and a government agency that wanted to dissect them all. This was not the quiet retirement he'd imagined. That night, as the others drifted off to sleep, Seraphine slipped into the kitchen where Sora was staring at a cup of cold tea. Her silver eyes caught the moonlight, and her voice was barely a whisper. Sora, she said, her hand resting on his shoulder. She's not the only one watching. I sense old enemies. Sora's blood ran cold. He turned to look at her, and in her eyes, he saw the reflection of a war he thought he'd left behind. How many? He asked. Enough. He set down the cup, his hands steady despite the dread pooling in his stomach. The daycare had just become a fortress. And the real war was only beginning. The night air hung heavy with the scent of rain and exhaust fumes as Sora sat cross-legged on the worn tatami mat of his apartment. The dim glow of a single lamp cast long shadows across the cluttered room, where Azrith sulked in a corner, Vex snored with a half-eaten bag of chips clutched to his chest, and Seraphine stood by the window, her silver hair catching the faint light like spun moonlight. Her eyes, usually sharp with a hint of playful malice, were now distant, fixed on something beyond the city's glittering skyline. Sora watched her for a long moment, feeling the subtle shift in the air, a tension that crackled like static before a storm. He knew that look. It was the same one she wore when she sensed a dimensional rift forming, or when a stray godling wandered too close to their sanctuary. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, her wings, though invisible in her powerless state, seemed to ache with a memory of flight. Seraphine, he said softly, breaking the silence. You've been staring out that window for an hour. What's wrong? She didn't turn, but her shoulders tightened. They're coming, Sora. The ones I told you about. The old enemies. He rose, his joints popping from sitting too long. He crossed the room, stopping beside her. The city lights blurred below, a sea of neon and shadow. Who are they? Seraphine's breath hitched. For a moment, she was no longer the elegant, manipulative queen who could charm a dragon into submission. She was a woman carrying a weight that bent her spine. I wasn't always this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I fell, I was a high angel. A seraphim of the 7th choir. My purpose was to execute the will of the celestial host, to cleanse the impure, to burn away the imperfect. Sora's blood ran cold. He had known she was a fallen angel, but the details had always been shrouded in her deliberate vagueness. Now, the truth seeped through her words like poison. I was sent to destroy a mortal city, she continued, her hand pressing against the glass. A city of 1,000,000 souls. They had committed no sin that warranted annihilation, but the host deemed them impure because they harbored a demonic artifact. I was to erase them from existence, to make an example. She turned to face him, and Sora saw the tears glistening in her eyes. I couldn't do it. I refused. I told them that mortals were not playthings, that their lives held value beyond our judgment. And for that, they stripped me of my grace, cast me out, and branded me a traitor. Vex stirred, mumbling something about more chips before rolling over. Azritha's head lifted, his prideful mask cracking with curiosity. But Sora's focus remained on Seraphine. The old enemies are the ones who exiled me, she said, her voice hardening. They've sensed my presence here, and they will not rest until I am destroyed. But it's not just me they want. They see you, a slime who ascended to godhood, who now harbors a demon lord, a chaos dragon, and a fallen angel, as the ultimate impurity. They will come to erase us all. Sora's mind raced. The Supernatural Containment Bureau was one problem, but rogue angels were a different league entirely. He needed to understand the depth of her pain, to see the truth that shaped her. Without hesitation, he activated Memory Dive. A sharp pain lanced through his skull as 20% of his mana drained away. His vision blurred, and suddenly he was no longer in the apartment. He stood on a celestial battlefield, the air thick with the scent of ozone and burning light. Before him, a younger Seraphine, her wings radiant, her armor gleaming, stood before a council of blazing figures. Their voices thundered, demanding obedience. She refused. They tore her wings, scarred her soul, and cast her into the void. Sora felt every scream, every tear, every moment of her fall. The pain was not his, but he absorbed it, let it fill the hollow spaces in his chest. When he returned to his body, his cheeks were wet. Sora. Seraphine's voice was trembling. What did you do? He wiped his face, meeting her eyes. I saw. I felt it all. She stared at him, her lips parting in shock. You dove into my memories. That could have killed you. But it didn't. He stepped closer, his voice steady despite the lingering ache. And now I understand. You didn't fall because you were weak. You fell because you were strong enough to say no. You chose mercy over obedience. That's not a crime. That's a virtue. Seraphine's composure shattered. She sobbed, her hands flying to her mouth, and Sora pulled her into an embrace. She clung to him, her body shaking with years of suppressed grief. I've been so alone, she whispered. So afraid they would find me and finish what they started. They won't, Sora said, his voice a low growl. I promise you, Seraphine. I will protect you. This daycare, this family, is my fortress. And I will tear down any angel who tries to break it. She pulled back, her eyes red but fierce. Then let me give you something. A gift, to help you face them. She placed her hand on his chest, and a warmth spread through him, a golden light that seeped into his very core. He felt a shift, a hardening of his spirit. A notification appeared in his mind, celestial resistance, permanent passive, reduces damage from holy attacks. His body shimmered, and he felt his form evolve, becoming something more. Evolution, celestial slime hybrid. He looked at his hands, they were still human, but faint golden veins pulsed beneath the skin. Thank you, he said. Seraphine smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. No. Thank you. They stood in silence, the weight of the confession settling around them. Vex snored. Azrith muttered something about sentimental nonsense, but didn't turn away. The night wore on, and eventually, they drifted to sleep, a fragile peace. But it didn't last. The next morning, Sora was making coffee when a blinding golden light descended on the apartment. The walls shook, the windows rattled, and a voice boomed, deep and resonant, like the tolling of a celestial bell. Seraphine, traitor. Your sentence is death. Sora's hand tightened around the coffee mug. He turned, the golden veins on his skin pulsing. Azrith scrambled to his feet, Vex dropped his chips, and Seraphine stood frozen, her face pale. Looks like breakfast is cancelled, Sora said, setting the mug down. Let's go greet our guests. The golden light that had descended on the apartment didn't fade. It intensified, boiling through the cracks in the window frame, turning the cheap curtains into translucent sheets of fire. Sora felt the weight of it pressing against his skin, a holy pressure that made his newly evolved celestial slime hybrid form hum with dissonant frequencies. Seraphine stood frozen beside him, her silver hair whipping in a wind that wasn't there, her eyes locked on the ceiling as if she could see through it to the heavens beyond. They're here, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising hum. Azrith scrambled to his feet, knocking over a stack of manga. Who? Who's here? I demand names. I demand. 3 spears of pure light shattered the apartment's front wall. Sora didn't think. He moved. His body, still adjusting to its new form, responded with a speed that surprised even him. He threw himself in front of the others, his hands outstretched, and screamed a word that wasn't a word, a syllable pulled from the depths of Seraphine's gifted power. Barrier of the Fallen. The air crystallized. A dome of translucent silver erupted around them, jagged and beautiful like shattered church windows. The spears struck it with the sound of 1,000 bells ringing in discord, and the barrier held, but Sora felt the cost. 30% of his mana drained in an instant, leaving him lightheaded, his vision swimming at the edges. Through the barrier, he saw them. 3 figures standing in the rubble of his living room, their wings folded like cloaks of white fire. They were beautiful in the way that glaciers were beautiful, cold, ancient, and utterly indifferent to the life they crushed. Their armor was not metal but solidified light, etched with runes that burned Sora's eyes when he tried to read them. The tallest one, a male with eyes like molten gold, raised his spear. Seraphine, fallen queen. By the decree of the celestial host, you are sentenced to dissolution. Your corruption ends here. Seraphine's composure cracked. For the first time since Sora had known her, she looked afraid. Gabriel's hounds, she breathed. They sent the executors. Vex, who had been hiding behind the sofa, suddenly roared, a sound that was more frustration than fury. He lunged forward, his claws elongating, his teeth baring. I'll eat them. I'll eat their shiny wings. Vex, no. Sora shouted, but the dragon was already past him, slipping through a gap in the barrier that Sora hadn't sealed. The nearest angel didn't even flinch. She flicked her wrist and a chain of light wrapped around Vex's throat, lifting him off the ground. He gagged, his claws scratching uselessly at the holy restraint. Pathetic, the angel said. A chaos dragon reduced to this. The fall was truly your undoing. Azrith stepped forward, his hands crackling with the faintest traces of his old power, shadows that barely stretched an inch before dissipating. Release him. I am Azrith, Lord of the Seventh Abyss. I command you. The angel backhanded him without looking. Azrith flew into the kitchen counter, crumpling against the cabinets with a groan. Sora's blood, or what passed for blood in his new form, boiled. He felt the bonding pact from inside him, the connection to each of these ridiculous, broken, beloved creatures. They were his responsibility. His family. And these winged bastards had just broken his wall. He stepped out of the barrier. Sora, don't. Seraphine cried. But he was already channeling. The power he had absorbed from her, celestial resistance, sang in his veins, telling him that holy fire would not burn him as easily as it would burn others. He reached deep into himself, past the mana reserves, past the stamina, into something more fundamental. His lifespan. The years he had accumulated through countless battles in that other world. He pulled a decade's worth of existence into a single point. Celestial banishment. The angel holding Vex froze. Her eyes widened as a pillar of silver light erupted from Sora's chest, striking her directly. She didn't scream. She simply unraveled, her form dissolving into motes of light that were sucked upward, through the ceiling, through the roof, back to whatever realm she had come from. The chain around Vex's throat dissolved, and he dropped to the floor, gasping. Sora staggered. 10% of his lifespan. Gone. He felt older, somehow, the weight of missing years pressing on his bones. But there were 2 left. The male executor snarled. You dare. Sora didn't let him finish. He reached for Vex's power, the chaotic, wild energy that the dragon had lent him through their bond. He pulled it into his throat, felt his vocal cords transform, felt his lungs expand with fire. Dragon's roar. The sound that erupted from him was not a scream. It was the death cry of a star, the birth cry of a world, compressed into a single wave of force. The remaining angels were thrown backward, their wings snapping, their armor cracking. They crashed through the already broken wall and tumbled into the street below, stunned. Sora's knees buckled. 20% of his stamina gone. His vision went black for a moment, then returned in patches. Sora. Seraphine was beside him, her hands on his face, her eyes wild. You fool. You absolute fool. Finish them, he rasped. I can't. She nodded. She turned to face the 2 angels struggling to rise from the rubble of the street. Her wings, black, tattered, beautiful, spread wide. She raised her hand, and a light gathered there, but it wasn't the cold gold of the celestial host. It was warm, soft, like a sunrise after a storm. You were my brothers once, she said, her voice carrying a sorrow that made Sora's chest ache. But you chose cruelty. I choose mercy. Even now. She released the light. It washed over the angels not as a weapon, but as a purification, a gentle force that stripped away their armor, their weapons, their will to fight. They collapsed, unconscious, their wings fading to gray. Silence fell. The hum was gone. The golden light was gone. Sora lay on the floor, staring at the cracked ceiling. His body felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. His mana was at 40%. His stamina was critically low. And he had just lost 10 years of his life. Worth it, he thought. Every second. He heard footsteps on the balcony. Light. Deliberate. The sound of someone who wanted to be heard. Sora turned his head. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the Tokyo night skyline. Hooded. Cloaked in shadows that seemed to drink the light around them. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but Sora felt the weight of their gaze like a blade pressed against his throat. Impressive, the figure said, their voice smooth and ageless. But you've only delayed the inevitable. Sora tried to rise, but his body refused. He could only watch as the figure stepped back, dissolving into the darkness, leaving nothing but a faint whisper of laughter behind. Seraphine rushed to the balcony, but there was no one there. The street below was empty. The angels were gone. Sora, she said, her voice trembling. Who was that? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time since arriving in Tokyo, he had no idea what was coming next. And that terrified him more than any angel ever could. The apartment's living room was a wreck. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling, plaster dust coated every surface, and a faint smell of ozone still clung to the air from the executor's assault. Sora lay slumped against the wall, his breath shallow, his celestial slime hybrid form flickering like a dying flame. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and dark circles ringed his eyes. Every muscle screamed, and the taste of copper lingered in his mouth. Azrith sat cross-legged on the floor, nursing a bruised arm, his pride more wounded than his body. Vex was curled in a corner, whimpering as he licked a gash on his forearm, the Chaos Dragon reduced to a scared child. Seraphine knelt beside Sora, her elegant fingers brushing his forehead, her golden eyes wide with concern. You should not have pushed so hard, she whispered, her voice trembling. That spell, it cost you years. Sora forced a weak smile. Better me than you three. A soft knock echoed from the balcony. Not the frantic rap of an enemy, but a deliberate, measured tap, like a teacher announcing his presence. Sora's head snapped up, his instincts screaming. The sliding door was locked, but the figure on the other side simply stepped through the glass as if it were mist. He was tall, with silver hair that cascaded past his shoulders and eyes that held no pupils, just swirling galaxies of muted light. He wore a simple gray robe, unadorned, and his feet hovered an inch above the floor. He carried no weapon, but the air around him bent subtly, as if reality itself deferred to his presence. Peace, the figure said, raising a hand. His voice was calm, ancient, and devoid of malice. I am not here to fight. Seraphine rose, her wings flaring, though they were tattered and dim. Who are you? I have many names. Some call me the Watcher. Others, the Balance. I was a god once, before the age of heroes, before your world and mine split apart. He turned his gaze to Sora. And I am here for them. Sora pushed himself upright, his legs wobbling. They're not going anywhere. I expected that answer. The Watcher smiled, a sad, weary expression. But hear me out. Heaven and hell have already mobilized. The executors were scouts. The next wave will be led by archangels and archdemons working together, an unprecedented alliance. They want the 3 ex-villains erased from existence, lest their residual power destabilize the multiverse. Azrith snorted. We're powerless. We're barely a threat to a cat. Your power is not the issue. Your existence is a symbol. Every demon lord, every fallen angel, every chaos beast that surrendered looks to you as proof that redemption is possible. That threatens the order of both heaven and hell. The Watcher turned back to Sora. I can take them to a dimension I created, a pocket realm of endless peace. No one can enter without my permission. They will be safe, and you will be free to live your quiet life. Sora's eyes narrowed. And what do you get? I get to preserve balance. A war between heaven and hell on earth would shatter this world. I am trying to prevent that. Sora stepped forward, his heart pounding. He activated Truth Sight, and the world shifted. He saw the Watcher not as a man, but as a web of golden threads connecting to countless dimensions. But at the center of that web was a knot, dark, tangled, greedy. The Watcher's true intention was hidden beneath layers of calm. He wanted to use Azrith, Vex, and Seraphine as bargaining chips. Trade them to heaven for a piece of the celestial throne, and to hell for dominion over the abyss. The pocket dimension was a cage, not a sanctuary. "You're lying," Sora said, his voice cold. "You want to sell them." The Watcher's smile faltered. "You see deeper than I anticipated." "A pity." Sora felt the rage build, not the hot fury of battle, but the cold, protective anger of a parent. He had nothing left. His mana was at 40%, his stamina critically low, and his lifespan had already been drained by celestial banishment. But he had one card left. "You made a mistake," Sora said, his voice resonating with an otherworldly echo. "You threatened my family." He activated Evolutionary Burst. The cost was immediate, 50% of his mana vanished, and 10% of his health drained away. His body convulsed as light erupted from his pores. His form began to shift, not into the celestial slime hybrid, but into something beyond. His skin turned to crystalline obsidian, veins of molten gold pulsing beneath. Wings of pure starlight unfurled from his back, and his eyes became twin suns. The air crackled with power, and the apartment's walls groaned under the pressure. Azrith gasped. Vex whimpered and hid behind the sofa. Seraphine stared, tears streaming down her face. The Watcher took a step back, his calm finally breaking. This is not possible. You are a slime. A former dungeon mob." "I was a slime," Sora said, his voice layered with harmonics. "Now I'm something you'll have to bow to." He raised a hand, and the Watcher was lifted off the ground, suspended in a field of golden light. The ancient god struggled, but his power was nothing compared to the raw, desperate evolution Sora had forced. For a moment, Sora saw the Watcher's fear, the fear of a being who had never truly been challenged. "I will not take them," the Watcher said, his voice strained. "I will leave. I will tell the others that this dimension is protected." Sora held him for a long moment, then released him. The Watcher stumbled, catching himself before he fell. "The next ones won't be so merciful," the Watcher said, his composure returning. "You have bought time, but not peace. Prepare." He stepped backward through the glass door, and vanished into the night. Sora's form collapsed. The wings dissipated, the crystalline skin cracked and flaked away, and he shrank into a small, gelatinous blob, his original slime form. He was barely conscious, his mind foggy, his body screaming. Seraphine rushed to him, scooping him up in her hands. Tears dripped onto his translucent surface. You risked everything for us." "Why?" He couldn't answer. He could only pulse weakly, a faint glow of warmth. Azrith knelt beside her, his hand hovering over Sora's form. "He's a fool," he said, his voice rough. "A magnificent fool." Vex sniffled, rubbing his eyes. "Is he going to be okay?" Seraphine clutched Sora to her chest, her wings wrapping around him like a cocoon. "He will be. I swear it." Outside, the Tokyo skyline glittered, indifferent to the war that had just been averted. In the distance, a single star flickered, then went dark. The first thing Sora registered was the smell of burning. It was acrid, smoky, and utterly wrong for a kitchen. He tried to open his eyes, but his body felt like a lead weight. No, he didn't have a body. He was a slime again, a quivering blob of translucent blue on the tatami mat. His consciousness swam in a fog of exhaustion, his mana reserves at a perilous -10%. Every instinct screamed at him to rest, to absorb ambient energy, to do anything but move. Yet the burning smell grew stronger, accompanied by a string of curses in a language that made the air vibrate. "By the abyssal flames of my forsaken throne, why does this infernal device reject my will?" Azritha's voice boomed from the kitchen, followed by a clatter of metal. "It is a box of fire. It should obey its master." Sora forced his gelatinous form to ripple, just enough to roll onto his side, or what passed for a side. Through the doorway, he saw Azrith, the former demon lord, standing before the stove with a frying pan in one hand and a spatula in the other. His black hair was singed at the tips, his regal robes replaced by an apron that read, "Kiss the Cook," in pink letters. The pan held a blackened, smoking mass that might have once been eggs. Azritha's face was a mask of fury and concentration, as if he were trying to conquer a kingdom rather than cook breakfast. "You're supposed to lower the heat," came Vex's voice from the living room. The ex-Chaos Dragon was sprawled on the sofa, his scaled arms wrapped around a bag of potato chips. He shoved a handful into his mouth, crunching loudly. And use oil. Or butter. Or something. I saw it on TV. Silence, worm. I do not take culinary advice from a creature who ate the neighbor's garden gnome last week. It looked tasty. Sora let out a mental sigh. This was his life now. He was a god-tier slime reduced to babysitting 3 overpowered toddlers in human form. But as he watched Azrith struggle with the stove, a strange warmth spread through his core. They were trying. They were actually trying to take care of him. Seraphine glided into the room, her white wings folded neatly behind her back. She carried a bucket of water and a mop, her elegant dress replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. Her silver hair was tied in a ponytail, and her expression was one of serene determination. She set the bucket down and began mopping the floor with precise, graceful strokes. Sora is awake, she said without looking up. His mana signature is stabilizing, but he is still weak. Azrith spun around, the pan still in his hand. Sora. You are conscious. Behold, I have prepared a feast worthy of a returning hero. He gestured to the smoking mess. It is, a symbolic feast. Vex snorted, sending chipped crumbs flying. It's burnt garbage, Azrith. You're going to kill him. I will kill you first, dragon. Sora willed himself to shift, to form a small pseudopod that waved weakly. He didn't have the energy to speak, but he didn't need to. Seraphine understood. She set down the mop and walked over to the kitchen, gently taking the pan from Azrith's hands. Let me, she said softly. You can set the table. Azrith looked ready to argue, but something in Seraphine's calm gaze made him deflate. Fine. But only because Sora requires proper sustenance. He turned and began pulling plates from the cabinet, his movements stiff but careful. Vex finally peeled himself off the sofa, leaving a trail of crumbs. He waddled over to Sora and knelt down, his yellow eyes wide. Hey, Blob. You look terrible. Like, really terrible. Like that time I fell into a lava pit and my scales melted off. He paused. That was a good day. Sora's pseudopod twitched. He wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. Instead, he focused on his internal systems, assessing the damage. His body was intact, but his mana was in critical condition. He needed to recover, but normal regeneration would take weeks. He had a faster way, restorative evolution. It would cost 30% of his mana he didn't have. But if he could absorb ambient energy from the environment, from his wards, he might just pull it off. He closed his eyes, metaphorically, and reached out with his life sense. The apartment was saturated with residual power, Azrith's demonic essence, Vex's chaotic energy, Seraphine's holy tainted aura. They were like batteries, leaking energy into the space around them. Sora focused, drawing that energy into himself, filtering it through his core. It was slow, painful work, like drinking through a straw made of needles. But after an hour, his mana ticked up from -10 to 0. He could work with that. He triggered restorative evolution. The world went white. His body dissolved, then reformed, cells knitting together with renewed vigor. The exhaustion lifted, replaced by a warm, tingling sensation. When he opened his eyes again, he was humanoid, pale skin, dark hair, tired eyes. He sat up slowly, flexing his fingers. His clothes were gone, replaced by a simple yukata that Seraphine must have draped over him. Sora. Azrith dropped a plate, which shattered on the floor. You are healed. Vex clapped his hands together, sending a shockwave through the room. Finally. I was getting bored of talking to a blob. Seraphine turned from the stove, a genuine smile crossing her lips. Welcome back. Sora opened his mouth to speak, but his voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. Thanks. All of you. He looked at the kitchen, where Seraphine had salvaged the eggs into a passable scramble, and at the table, which Azrith had set with mismatched plates and cups. You've been busy. We had to learn, Seraphine said, bringing the pan to the table. You were unconscious for a week. We couldn't just let you starve. A week? Sora's eyes widened. He had lost a week of time. That was concerning. But he pushed the thought aside. He had more immediate concerns. I need to teach you something. A skill that will make things easier for all of us. He raised his hand, and a soft blue light emanated from his palm. This is household harmony. It's a group buff that reduces stress and increases cooperation. It's not a combat skill, but it will help you work together without incidents. Azrith crossed his arms. I do not need a spell to cooperate. I am a leader of legions. You burnt eggs, Vex said. I will burn you. Sora ignored them and channeled the skill, sending tendrils of light toward each of them. Azrith flinched, then relaxed as the warmth washed over him. Vex's eyes glazed over, and he let out a contented sigh. Seraphine closed her eyes, a soft hum escaping her lips. There, Sora said, lowering his hand. Now, let's eat. They gathered around the table, a mismatched family of former villains and a slime-turned-human. The eggs were slightly burnt, the toast was cold, and the coffee was too strong. But as they ate, talking and laughing about nothing in particular, Sora felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in centuries. This was what he had fought for. This was what he would protect. The television was on in the background, tuned to the evening news. A reporter's voice cut through the chatter, massive energy spike detected in Tokyo Bay. Authorities are urging residents to stay indoors as an unexplained phenomenon. Sora's fork froze midair. He turned to the screen, where a live feed showed a swirling vortex of purple and gold light opening above the water. The portal was enormous, large enough to swallow a skyscraper. And from it, figures began to emerge, armored warriors wielding swords and shields, dark-robed mages chanting in unison, and towering demons with wings of fire. Azrith dropped his fork. That's the old world's army. The combined forces of the Hero Alliance and the Demon Horde. Vex's scales bristled. They're here. They're actually here. Seraphine stood, her wings spreading wide. They've come to finish what the Watcher started. Sora stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The portal continued to disgorge soldiers, hundreds of them, thousands. They lined up in formation, their eyes fixed on the city, on the apartment building where he sat. He had a week of recovery. A week of peace. And now, it was over. He set down his fork and stood, his yukata billowing around him. Get ready, he said, his voice calm but firm. We have guests. The sky above Tokyo Bay tore open with a sound like shattering glass. A rift of violet and gold, crackling with energy that made the city's lights flicker and die. The air grew heavy, thick with ozone and the metallic tang of old magic. Sora stood on the balcony of his cramped apartment, his humanoid form tense, his new senses screaming warnings. Behind him, Azrith, Vex, and Seraphine crowded the doorway, their faces pale. They're here, Azrith whispered, his voice stripped of its usual bravado. I can feel them. Heroes and demons, together. Vex's stomach growled, but his eyes were wide. Are they here to eat us? No, Seraphine said, her elegant fingers gripping the doorframe. They're here to destroy us. I can sense their intent, they see us as an anomaly that must be erased. Sora didn't answer. He was already moving, his feet carrying him down the stairs and out onto the street. The streets were empty, the few pedestrians who had been out now fleeing in panic. The rift was a mile away, but he could see the first figures emerging, a tide of armored warriors and twisted demons, their weapons gleaming, their eyes locked on the source of the disturbance. He stopped in the middle of the road, his heart pounding. The coalition was massive, 100 strong, and they were united. That was the terrifying part. In the old world, heroes and demons were eternal enemies. For them to march side by side meant something had changed. Something had scared them more than each other. And that something was him. Slime. A voice boomed from the front ranks, amplified by magic. A tall figure in white and gold armor stepped forward, his face hidden behind a helmet shaped like a lion's head. We know what you are. A former dungeon mob who stole power from the gods. You think you can hide in this weak world, but we will not allow it. You are a threat to all realms. Sora felt a cold calm settle over him. He had expected this. He had hoped for more time, but he had prepared for the worst. He closed his eyes and triggered, tactical evolution. A wave of energy washed through him, and the world slowed. He could see the threads of power connecting each enemy, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears. The heroes were strong in body but weak in spirit. The demons were fierce but undisciplined. Their alliance was fragile, held together only by their shared terror of him. He opened his eyes. Azrith, take the left flank. Use despair amplification on the demons. Break their morale. Azrath stepped forward, his cloak billowing despite the lack of wind. Finally. Something I can do. He raised his hand, and a dark mist spread from his palm, creeping toward the demon ranks. The first demons to touch it stumbled, their faces twisting in confusion and fear. Whispers of their old failures, their lost power, their shattered dreams flooded their minds. They began to falter. Vex, Sora said, the right flank. The heroes. Use, Dragon's Wrath, ... Vex grinned, his childlike face lighting up with savage joy. I've been waiting for this. He opened his mouth, and a torrent of fire, black and gold, laced with chaos magic, erupted from his throat. The heroes raised shields, but the fire was not ordinary flame. It warped reality around it, bending light and sound, making the heroes' weapons feel heavy and their armor seem to tighten. They staggered, struggling to advance. Seraphine, center support. Purification field. Keep them from regrouping. Seraphine nodded, her wings spreading, still small, still weak, but enough. She rose a few feet into the air, her hands glowing with soft light. A dome of shimmering energy expanded outward, pushing back the coalition's advance, disrupting their formations. The heroes and demons found themselves unable to coordinate, their attacks scattering. Sora walked forward, his steps deliberate. The leaders of the coalition, 5 of them, each radiating power, stepped out to meet him. A human paladin, a demon warlock, an elven mage, a dwarven berserker, and a shadowy figure that seemed to be made of smoke. They were the strongest of their kind, sent to end him. He didn't stop. He raised his hand and activated power absorption. A cold, terrible hunger filled him, and he felt his lifespan drain, 30%, gone in an instant. But the effect was immediate. The leaders froze, their powers flowing out of them like water from a cracked vessel. The paladin's sword dimmed. The warlock's flames guttered. The mage's staff went dark. The berserker's muscles shrank. The shadow figure flickered and became solid, revealing a terrified human face. What have you done?" the paladin gasped, falling to his knees. Sora stood before them, his expression unreadable. "I've taken what you came to destroy. Now leave. Tell your masters that this world is under my protection. If they come again, I will not be so merciful." The coalition broke. The demons fled first, their morale shattered by Azratha's despair. The heroes followed, their courage broken by Vex's fire and Seraphine's light. The leaders scrambled to their feet and ran, their powers gone, their pride in tatters. The dust settled. The rift began to close, its edges fraying. Sora let out a long breath, his body aching from the cost of the evolution and absorption. He turned to check on his wards, but a sound stopped him. A slow, deliberate clap. He spun around. A single figure remained, standing atop a broken lamppost. Golden armor, radiant and flawless, with a long cape of crimson. The helmet was off, revealing a face that Sora remembered with a clarity that burned. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smirk that had haunted his nightmares for 1,000 years. "You've grown strong, slime," the hero said, his voice smooth and mocking. "But I've come to finish what I started." Sora's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. He knew that face. It was the hero who had found him in the dungeon, a mere slime, and killed him for sport. The hero who had laughed as his form dissolved into nothing. The hero who had set him on the path to godhood, but only because he had been too cruel to let him live. "You," Sora whispered. The hero's smirk widened. "Miss me?" The golden hero stood in the center of the ruined park, his armor gleaming under the flickering streetlights. Sora recognized him instantly, the same radiant figure who had cut down the original slime 1,000 years ago, the one whose blade had ended the life of a creature that had never asked for war. Aldrich's face was carved from stone, his eyes cold and unwavering. Sora's heart raced, but he forced himself to step forward. Behind him, Azrath was trembling, Vex growling low in his throat, and Seraphine's wings spread defensively. The air was thick with tension, the scent of ozone and burnt grass mixing with the distant hum of Tokyo's nightlife. "You," Aldrich said, his voice like a blade drawn from a sheath. "You are an abomination. A slime that stole the form of a god, that now coddles the very villains we defeated." Sora's fists clenched. "They're not villains anymore. They're learning. Learning. They are chaos incarnate. And you," Aldrich stepped closer, his golden aura flaring. "You are the worst of them. You wear the face of humanity, but underneath, you are still nothing but a slime. The word struck deeper than Sora expected. He felt the old fear, the primal terror of being nothing, of being crushed under a boot. But he also felt something else, the warmth of the bonds he had forged, the laughter of his wards, the peace he had built. I am not nothing, Sora said, his voice steady. And I will not let you hurt them. Aldrich raised his sword, the blade glowing with holy light. Then you will die again. Sora closed his eyes. He reached deep into himself, to the core of his being, and activated memory fusion. The cost was immense, half his mana drained in an instant, but the reward was clarity. He felt the original slime's memories flood into him, the cold darkness of the dungeon, the fear of being hunted, the desperate hope for survival. And then the final moment, when Aldrich's blade had descended, and the slime had felt nothing but a quiet, resigned sadness. Sora opened his eyes. They were wet with tears, but his gaze was soft. I remember, he whispered. I remember being afraid. I remember being killed. But I also remember that I never hated you. I just wanted to live. Aldrich faltered. His sword wavered. What are you doing? Sora stepped forward, his hand reaching out. You're stuck in the past, Aldrich. You're still fighting a war that ended 1,000 years ago. But I'm not that slime anymore. I'm Sora. And I have a family now. He activated empathic strike. The cost was steep, 20% of his health, a sharp pain lancing through his chest, but he pushed through. A wave of golden energy pulsed from him, washing over Aldrich. The hero gasped as he felt every life he had ever taken, every wound he had inflicted, every tear he had caused. The weight of 1,000 years of violence crashed down on him. Aldrich's sword clattered to the ground. He fell to his knees, his hands covering his face. Stop, please, stop. Sora knelt in front of him. I forgive you, he said softly. But you need to forgive yourself too. For a long moment, there was only the sound of Aldrich's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, he lowered his hands. His eyes were red, his face streaked with tears. He looked up at Sora, and for the first time, there was no hatred in his gaze, only exhaustion. Why? Aldrich whispered. Why do you show me mercy? Because I've learned that hate is a cage, Sora replied. And I don't want to live in one anymore. Aldrich stood, his movements shaky. He picked up his sword, but did not raise it. Instead, he turned and walked away, his golden armor dimming with every step. He did not look back. The park fell silent. Azrith let out a shaky breath, Vex sat down heavily on the grass, and Seraphine folded her wings, her eyes glistening. Sora felt a warmth spreading through him, a new strength, a permanent mental fortitude. The skill, closure, settled into his soul like a stone dropping into still water. That night, they returned to the apartment. Azrith cooked a celebratory meal, burnt, but edible. Vex ate 3 bowls of rice. Seraphine hummed an old lullaby. Sora sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars. But as the clock struck midnight, a crack appeared in the sky. It was thin, barely visible, but it split the darkness like a wound. A voice, ancient and vast, whispered from the rift, the final reckoning is nigh. The air grew cold. The lights flickered. Sora's wards rushed to the balcony, their faces pale. What was that? Azrith whispered. Sora looked up at the crack, his heart pounding. I don't know, he said. But I have a feeling our peace just ran out. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Sora's apartment, casting pale stripes across the living room floor. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the air was still. No dimensional tremors. No screaming. No one trying to eat the microwave. Sora leaned against the kitchen counter, a cup of instant coffee warming his palms. He watched the 3 of them, Azrith, Vex, Seraphine, sprawled across his second-hand furniture like oversized house cats. Vex had his face buried in a bag of shrimp crackers, crumbs scattered across the cushion. Azrith was attempting to fold a fitted sheet, muttering curses under his breath as the fabric refused to obey. Seraphine sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through a fashion magazine with an expression of mild disdain. It was domestic. It was absurd. It was peaceful. Sora's chest tightened with something he didn't want to name. He had spent 1,000 years as a slime, grinding through dungeons, killing gods, and shattering thrones. He had never expected to feel this, this quiet warmth that came from watching three former villains struggle with a fitted sheet. He set down his coffee and walked over. "You're supposed to tuck the corners first." Azrith glared at him. "I know how to fold a sheet. I once commanded legions of hellfire. And yet the sheet is winning." Vex snorted, nearly choking on a cracker. Seraphine didn't look up, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Sora sat down on the arm of the couch, watching them. He felt something shift inside him, a resonance, like a tuning fork struck against his soul. The bonding pact he had formed with each of them pulsed gently, threads of silver light connecting their hearts. He had used it before, but only to stabilize them during crises. Now, he realized, the bond had grown deeper. It wasn't just a leash anymore. It was a bridge. He closed his eyes and focused. The skill, Harmony Evolution, flickered in his mind, a power he had unlocked but never used. It cost 10% of his mana, and it required a genuine emotional connection with all parties. He had been afraid to try it before. What if they rejected him? What if the bond shattered? But now, watching Azrith finally conquer the sheet and hold it up in triumph, watching Vex offer him a cracker with greasy fingers, watching Seraphine roll her eyes but hide a smile, Sora knew. He activated the skill. A gentle warmth spread from his chest, radiating outward in concentric rings. The silver threads of the bonding pact grew brighter, thicker, weaving together into a lattice of light. Azrith froze, the sheet slipping from his hands. Vex dropped his crackers. Seraphine's magazine slid to the floor. They all felt it. The connection deepened, solidified, became something more than a pact. It became a family. When the light faded, Sora opened his eyes. A new skill pulsed in his awareness, Family Shield. It was a protective barrier that scaled with the emotional connection of the group. The stronger their bond, the stronger the shield. He could feel it humming just beneath his skin, ready to be called upon. Azrith stared at him, his expression unreadable. "What did you just do?" "I made us a family," Sora said simply. Vex blinked. "Does that mean we get matching shirts?" Seraphine picked up her magazine, but her voice was soft. "It means we're tied together. For better or worse." "I'm okay with worse," Vex said, reaching for another cracker. Azrith looked at the crumpled sheet, then at Sora. He didn't say anything, but he nodded. That was enough. The rest of the week passed in a blur of small joys. Sora took them to a supermarket, where Vex discovered the concept of samples and nearly ate the entire display. Azrith argued with a cashier over a coupon for 10 whole minutes. Seraphine silently stole a pack of premium chocolate and slipped it into Sora's cart when no one was looking. They went to a movie theater. Vex screamed during a jump scare and accidentally melted the armrest. Azrith loudly criticized the villain's motivations. Seraphine fell asleep halfway through and drooled on Sora's shoulder. And then there was karaoke. Sora still didn't know how they had ended up in a private room, but Vex was gripping a microphone like a holy weapon, belting out a pop song in a language he didn't understand. Azrith was trying to harmonize, failing miserably. Seraphine sat in a corner, arms crossed, but her foot tapped to the beat. Sora watched them, feeling the family shield pulse with warmth. He had never wanted this. He had come to Tokyo for solitude, for silence, for a retirement that tasted like instant coffee and stale bread. But somehow, he had gotten something else. Something messier. Louder. Better. That night, they sat on the apartment's tiny balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. The air was cool, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the smell of grilled meat from a nearby yakiniku joint. "This isn't so bad," Azrith admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The food is better here," Vex added, patting his stomach. Seraphine said nothing, but she leaned slightly closer to Sora. He let himself breathe. For a moment, everything was perfect. Then the sky cracked. It started as a thin line of light, no wider than a hair, running vertically through the stars. Then it split open with a sound like tearing silk, revealing a chasm of blinding radiance. The light poured down, washing the city in an eerie glow. Cars stopped. People looked up. Some screamed. And through the crack, a hand emerged. It was colossal, easily the size of a building, made entirely of pure, condensed light. Fingers like pillars, each one carved with intricate runes that burned with ancient power. The hand reached downward, palm open, as if grasping for something. Sora's blood turned cold. The family shield, flared to life around them, a dome of silver light that pushed back against the radiance. But he could feel it straining. The hand was not just a threat. It was a declaration. "What is that?" Vex whispered, his voice trembling. Sora didn't answer. He didn't need to. He could feel the presence behind that hand, ancient, patient, and utterly without mercy. The final reckoning had come. He stood up, stepping in front of the others. "Get inside." "Sora," Azrith started. "Now." They obeyed, scrambling through the balcony door. Sora remained, staring up at the hand as it paused, hovering over the city. The runes on its fingers pulsed once, twice, then went dark. The hand clenched into a fist, and the crack in the sky began to close, sealing the light away. But Sora knew. This was not a retreat. It was a message. He looked down at his own hands, at the faint silver glow of the family shield, still flickering around them. He had built a family. He had found peace. And now, something was coming to tear it all apart. He clenched his fists. The calm was over. Behind him, the three ex-villains watched from the window, their faces pale. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. They were in this together now, for better or worse. And Sora would make sure that worse never had a chance. The sky above Tokyo split with a sound like tearing silk. Sora looked up from the kitchen counter, a half-chopped carrot in his hand, and saw a crack of pure white light running from horizon to horizon. The afternoon sun dimmed as if a curtain had been drawn over the world. Then the hand came through. It was colossal, made of light so bright it hurt to look at. The fingers were long and elegant, each joint articulated like a suit of celestial armor. It pushed through the crack, and the air around it shimmered with heat and pressure. The hand descended slowly, deliberately, aiming directly at Sora's apartment building. Azrith dropped his manga. "What in the nine hells is that?" Vex, who had been stuffing his face with potato chips, froze mid-chew. His dragon instincts flared, and he let out a low growl. That feels like the end of everything." Seraphine stepped up beside Sora, her silver eyes narrowed. "It's a god of order. They exist to maintain the balance of reality. Our presence here, your existence, it's all chaos to them." Sora felt the weight of her words. The hand was close now, close enough to see the veins of golden light pulsing beneath its surface. It was going to crush them. Crush the building. Crush the entire block. And there was nowhere to run. "I have an idea," Sora said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But it's going to cost me." He reached out with his mind, activating the bonding pact he had forged with each of them. The skill flared, and he felt their emotions, Azritha's pride, Vex's hunger, Seraphine's ancient sorrow. He wove them together, channeling every ounce of mana he had left, and then he pushed further. He felt his lifespan drain, a cold emptiness spreading through his core. "Unified evolution," he whispered. His body dissolved into a stream of silver light, merging with Azritha's shadow, Vex's fire, and Seraphine's holy darkness. The four of them became a single entity, a chimera god with 4 faces, 4 arms, and a body that crackled with raw, unstable power. Sora's consciousness was the anchor, holding them together. He looked up at the descending hand. The fingers were inches from the roof. He raised a fist, their fist, and punched upward. The impact sent a shockwave across the city, shattering windows and knocking people off their feet. The hand cracked, golden light spilling from the wound like blood. The god of order let out a roar that vibrated through the bones of every living thing in Tokyo. The hand withdrew, pulling back through the sky crack, which began to seal itself. But the chimera god was already falling apart. Sora felt the energy drain from him, felt his body revert to its original form, a small, gelatinous slime, barely able to hold its shape. He collapsed onto the apartment floor, the others lying around him in a heap, unconscious. The sky was still cracked, a faint scar of white light across the blue. And then, a whisper. Soft, ancient, echoing directly in his mind, "You've passed the test. The throne is yours." A new portal opened before him, a doorway made of pure white light, leading to a realm of endless radiance. Sora couldn't move. He could barely think. But he understood one thing, the true war was over. A new one was about to begin. The light was blinding. Not the harsh, sterile white of hospital lamps, but something alive, a pulsing, golden radiance that seemed to breathe. It poured from the crack in the sky like liquid sun, spilling onto the ruined street where Sora lay in his slime form, a quivering puddle of exhaustion. His friends were scattered around him. Azrith knelt on the cracked asphalt, his demonic horns dull and his eyes hollow. Vex had collapsed against a lamppost, his dragon tail limp and his stomach growling with emptiness. Seraphine stood, but barely, her wings were folded tight, her elegant dress torn at the hem. They had given everything to punch that hand. And now, something was offering them more. A voice echoed from the portal. It was not loud. It was soft, like a mother speaking to a child, but it carried weight that pressed against Sora's very soul. You have passed the test. You shattered the throne once. Now take it back. Become the god of balance. Rule both worlds. End all conflict. Sora's slime body trembled. He could feel the offer, it was real. The throne of chaos was not a physical seat, but a concept. A nexus of power that would grant him dominion over order and disorder, life and death, fantasy and reality. If he accepted, he would never be weak again. He could protect everyone. He could end the war before it began. But he could also feel the cost. The throne demanded a soul, his soul. It would strip away his humanity, his slime nature, his very sense of self. He would become a machine of balance, cold and impartial. No more laughter. No more cooking breakfast for a grumpy demon lord. No more watching Vex chase pigeons in the park. Azrith staggered to his feet. Sora, don't. I've seen what that throne does. It consumed my predecessor. It made him a puppet. Vex whimpered. I don't want you to go, Sora. Who will feed me if you become a god? Seraphine stepped forward, her voice sharp. The throne is a trap. It offers power to those who seek peace, but it turns them into jailers. You would be alone forever. Sora's slime body rippled. He had no mouth, but his voice came from everywhere. I know. He focused his remaining energy. There was a skill he had never used, absolute denial. It was a final option, a rejection so complete that it could sever even the bonds of fate. But the cost was steep, half of his remaining lifespan. He didn't know how long he had left. Maybe decades. Maybe hours. But he knew one thing, he would rather live a short life with them than an eternity alone. I refuse. The words were not spoken. They were thought. They were felt. They radiated from his core like a shockwave. The golden light flickered. The portal trembled. The voice gasped, an actual, human gasp of surprise. You would reject godhood? For what? Sora's form began to glow. Not with golden light, but with a soft, warm blue, the color of a hearth fire. I don't want a throne. I want a home. The portal screamed. The crack in the sky twisted and folded, collapsing in on itself. The realm of pure light shattered like glass, shards raining down as harmless sparks that dissolved before they touched the ground. The voice faded, but its last words echoed, you are a fool. But perhaps, a blessed one. The sky healed. The clouds parted. The sun broke through, warming the street. Sora's slime body convulsed. He felt something tear inside him, a piece of his life force, ripped away. His vision darkened. He was falling, dissolving, fading. But then hands caught him. Azritha's arms, surprisingly gentle. Vex's tail, wrapping around him like a blanket. Seraphine's wings, folding over them all. You idiot, Azrith muttered, but his voice cracked. You gave up half your life for us. Worth it, Sora whispered. His voice was weak, but steady. Vex sniffled. You're not allowed to die. I haven't finished eating all your snacks. Seraphine laughed, a soft, genuine sound. He's not dying, Vex. He's evolving. And she was right. Sora's slime body began to shift. It didn't grow larger or more human. Instead, it became clearer. More translucent. As if he was becoming pure energy, bound together by invisible threads. He could feel each of them, Azritha's pride, Vex's hunger, Seraphine's caution. They were connected to him now. Not as master and servant, but as family. Evolution complete, true god of bonds. He had no new powers. No flashy skills. But he could feel the threads that tied all living things together. He could strengthen them, mend them, protect them. He was not a god of war or balance. He was a god of connection. Slowly, painfully, he reformed into a humanoid shape. A young man with silver hair and eyes that shifted color like a kaleidoscope. He was weak, so weak he could barely stand. But he was alive. Azrith helped him to his feet. Can you walk? I can try. They limped down the street together, a ragtag group of broken villains and a slime who had refused godhood. The apartment building was still standing, though the top floor was a wreck. They would have to fix it. And cook dinner. And deal with the Supernatural Containment Bureau, who were probably already on their way. But for now, they were together. As they turned the corner, a small voice called out, "Mister, are you a superhero?" A little girl stood on the sidewalk, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide, innocent. She had seen the light show. She had seen them fall from the sky. Sora stopped. He looked at his friends, at the demon lord with his torn coat, the dragon with his growling stomach, the fallen angel with her dirty dress. They were a mess. They were chaos. They were home. He smiled. No. I'm just a babysitter. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tiny apartment, now transformed into something between a daycare and a fortress. Sora stood at the window, watching the cherry blossoms drift past, his silver hair catching the light. A month had passed since he had refused the throne of chaos, and the city had healed. But the scars remained, in the fractured pavement, in the wary glances of passers-by, and in the quiet hum of dimensional energy that still lingered in the air. Azrith was sprawled on the sofa, dramatically sighing every few seconds. I was a demon lord, he muttered, staring at the ceiling. Now I have to fold tiny chairs. The indignity. You folded 3 chairs, Sora said without turning. And you broke 2 of them. They were poorly made. Vex was in the corner, attempting to eat a rubber ball. His jaws stretched impossibly wide, but the ball bounced back out, hitting him in the forehead. He growled and tried again. Seraphine sat cross-legged on the floor, threading a needle through a torn curtain, her movements precise and elegant. She glanced at Sora, her eyes narrowing slightly. You're thinking about something, she said. Your aura flickers. Sora turned, his eyes shifting from silver to deep blue. I'm thinking about how to keep this place running. The Supernatural Containment Bureau is still watching. Agent Kaido hasn't given up. Let her come, Azrith said, sitting up. I'll show her what a real demon lord can do. Nothing, Sora interrupted. You can do nothing. You're powerless, remember. Azrith deflated, sinking back into the cushions. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Sora motioned for silence and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. A woman stood there, holding the hand of a small child, a boy with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold galaxies. The child was crying, silent tears streaming down his cheeks. Sora opened the door. Can I help you? The woman smiled nervously. I'm sorry to bother you. I heard you run a daycare for troubled children. My son, he's different. He keeps breaking things. Toys. Walls. Once, he accidentally made the neighbor's cat disappear for 3 hours. Sora looked at the boy. The child stared back, and Sora felt it, a faint tremor of power, ancient and immense, compressed into a tiny frame. A god of destruction. Lost. Frightened. What's his name? Sora asked. Riku, the woman said. He doesn't talk much. He's scared of himself. Sora knelt down, meeting Riku's eyes. He let his infinite patience flow outward, a calm wave of acceptance. The boy's crying stopped. His shoulders relaxed. Would you like to come in? Sora asked softly. We have snacks. And a very silly dragon who tries to eat balls. Vex, hearing his name, perked up. I am not silly. I am majestic. Riku almost smiled. The woman looked relieved. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do. Sora stood. It's fine. I specialize in unique children. He led Riku inside, and the boy immediately gravitated toward Vex, who was now trying to balance the rubber ball on his nose. Azrith raised an eyebrow. Another one? We're running out of chairs. We'll get more, Sora said. Seraphine watched Riku with sharp eyes. He carries the weight of old stars. He could unmake this city with a tantrum. Then we'll make sure he doesn't have tantrums, Sora replied. He added another chair to the table, a small wooden one that creaked under the weight of destiny. Riku sat down, and Vex offered him the rubber ball. The boy took it, holding it like a treasure. For a moment, the room was peaceful. Then the dimensional alarm went off. A high-pitched whine filled the apartment, and Sora's eyes snapped to the corner where he had installed a small device, a rift detector. Red lights flashed. A tear in reality was opening 3 blocks away. "Everyone stay here," Sora said, his voice calm but firm. "Azrith, watch the door. Seraphine, keep Riku calm. Vex, don't eat anything that glows." "What if it's delicious?" Vex asked. "Especially if it's delicious." Sora grabbed his coat and stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind him. The streets were quiet, the morning rush hour fading. He followed the signal to an alley between 2 convenience stores, where the air shimmered like heat haze. A figure stepped out of the rift. Tall. Armored. A sword glowing with holy light. "You," the figure said, pointing the blade at Sora. "You harbor the enemies of the divine. Hand them over, and you may live." Sora sighed. "I'm running a daycare. I don't have time for this." "You think this is a joke?" The hero stepped forward, the sword blazing. "I have been sent by the Council of Light to cleanse this world of the corruption you protect." Sora's eyes shifted to gold. "You're not the first hero to threaten my family. And you won't be the last." He raised his hand, and the air around him thickened. Threat display, activated, projecting an image of overwhelming power, a glimpse of the god he had become. The hero staggered, the sword trembling. "I don't want to fight you," Sora said. "I want to make breakfast. I want to teach a lost god how to fold paper cranes. I want to watch the sunset with people who matter to me. So leave. Or I will make you leave." For a long moment, the hero hesitated. Then the rift behind him closed, and he was alone. He lowered his sword. "This isn't over," he said, and vanished into the shadows. Sora stood there, breathing slowly. The adrenaline faded, replaced by exhaustion. He walked back to the apartment, opened the door, and found chaos. Riku had accidentally turned the sofa into a pile of glitter. Azrith was arguing with Vex about who was responsible. Seraphine was calmly sweeping the glitter into a dustpan. "I was gone for 5 minutes," Sora said. "It was him." Azrith pointed at Vex. "It was him." Vex pointed back. Riku looked at Sora, eyes wide. "I'm sorry." Sora knelt down. "It's okay. Glitter is just temporary chaos. We can fix it." He taught Riku how to use a vacuum cleaner. The boy's eyes lit up as the glitter disappeared. "It's like unmaking," he whispered. "Exactly," Sora said. "But for good things." That evening, the 5 of them sat on the roof, watching the sunset paint Tokyo in shades of orange and pink. Riku sat between Vex and Azrith, holding a paper crane he had folded himself. Seraphine leaned against the railing, her silver hair flowing in the breeze. Sora looked at them, his family of ex-villains, of lost gods, of broken things learning to be whole. "Peace isn't the absence of war," he said quietly. "It's the choice to protect what matters." Azrith snorted. "That's cheesy." "Shut up," Vex said. "It's nice." Riku smiled, a real smile, and Sora felt something warm settle in his chest. The daycare was full. The family was growing. And for now, that was enough. Far away, in the shadows of a skyscraper, a figure watched through binoculars. They held a photograph, a slime, glowing with ancient power, in the heart of a battlefield. "Found you," they whispered, and smiled.